Hey everybody, JP with BigSexyBeast.com here, and I've had a bunch of people ask me about how I did the solar setup on the Tundra, so I thought I'd shoot a little bit more detailed video just focusing in on the solar setup. So here it goes. So I'll put links to everything that I talk about in the description below, but I think the first thing here to kind of talk about with the system setup is I have a 200 watt thin flexible solar panel that is on top of the camper shell here. If you've seen the other videos, it's really not visible at all from the ground, which is kind of the intent. It's stealth solar setup. But this panel has turned out to work really well. I'll actually show you some real output numbers. Even though we're pretty late in the day and not getting a lot of sun, you'll still see that we're making some power here. But that is the solar panel setup. I got it off Amazon. It's attached to the top of the camper shell with VHB tape from 3M, which is nice because if I ever want to take it off, I can take it off and clean off any adhesive residue, and you'll never know that it was there. Kind of the second main component of the solar setup to talk about here is the battery. The Tundra does not have a dual battery setup, and it doesn't need one because of the way that I've sized everything. But with the Tundra, I did swap out the factory battery, and I went to a 105 amp hour AGM Northstar X2 Power deep cycle battery, which works really well in solar setups. And so in theory, you're only supposed to use about 50% of your usable battery capacity. So with 105 amp hours, effectively I've got 52 amp hours that I can draw at any given time and still be above 50% battery capacity. If I do happen to draw it down all the way, just a little bit in the sun will give me enough to restart the Tundra. But as I've also talked about in other videos, I carry a NOCO lithium ion jump pack in the center console that's always plugged in and always being charged if I ever do need to jump start myself. But it has not been an issue so far, and I'll show you some power consumption numbers in a minute. One thing that I've learned in building solar systems here over the last several years, and I've done several of them now, I try to do at least a 1-for-1 on the panel to the battery. So for example, with a 105 amp hour battery, at a minimum you need about a 100 watt solar panel. The Tundra is oversized. I have a 200 watt solar panel with a 105 amp hour battery. That means during the day I can use most of my accessories, camping and things, and never actually touch the battery capacity. So that's the battery, second component. The third component of the solar setup lives underneath, the third and fourth component live underneath the water tank. So let me pull that water tank out and I'll show you what those components are. All right, the third component of the solar setup is this guy. It's a Victron Energy MPPT 7515 solar controller. Handles 15 amps, which means it'll handle, I think, 220 watts of solar, which matches well with the panel that's up top, which is a 200 watt solar panel. It has a set of 14 gauge wires that go up to the solar panel and come down through the camper shell into the PV or photovoltaic section of the controller. It has 10 gauge wires, black and red, that follow along the frame up to the battery that you just saw for the trickle charge back to the battery. And then it has two 10 gauge wires out that go to the load component of the solar controller. And that load component goes into the fourth component here, which is a fuse box and distribution panel. A couple other things to note here. Attached to the solar controller is a Bluetooth enabled dongle, which allows me to connect up to it with my iPad and check the status of the solar system. What else? This guy also has a low voltage shutoff on the load circuit here. So when it reaches below a certain voltage, it will actually cut off all of the components that are powered from the solar system to protect the battery. Off the solar panel here, on the load side, I have connected obviously my fridge. I have all the lights that are in the shell here. I have the fan that's up here. And then up in front, which I'll show you in just a minute, is a distribution panel that has USB ports, voltometer, and 12-volt cigarette lighter plug. This plug here with bullet connectors is a quick release plug that stays kind of hidden and out of sight. That goes to the diesel heater if I need to use it during the winter time. So that's the fourth and fifth components of the solar system. The next component of the solar system is up here in front of the fridge. If you can see that there, this is a Blue Sea panel that I got off Amazon. Again, I'll put links to everything in the description. This is current voltage on the battery of the truck. You have two USB ports that are here. You have a 12-volt cigarette lighter port here, and down at the bottom there's a switch that turns this entire panel off. Fridge comes into this panel here, so I can shut the fridge off there. You actually have a voltmeter on the fridge as well. This fridge has been on non-stop since I got home from the Silamo trip. So when we look at the power consumption numbers, you can see kind of how that's been doing on a weekly basis. All right, so let's take a look here. Let's go to our embedded apps and our Victron Connect app. It will find the Bluetooth dongle on that solar controller there and pull up all the relevant stats. So as I mentioned, it's kind of late in the day here. If I can get an angle here where you can see, we are putting out about 6 watts right now, so not a lot. But the other thing about that MPPT controller is that it varies the input into the battery based on the load. Solar panel right now is at, if I can get that angle a little bit better, 20.6 volts, 21 volts. That varies. It's putting out about 0.3 amps. The battery voltage is at 13.2. We've got 4 amps of positive current going into the battery. And then the load side of that solar charge controller, as I was telling you there, is currently on as its state, and it's putting out about 0.1 amps. That's going to the fridge, is the main thing there. Now if I swipe over here, you will see my output and consumption for the last several days. Let's go down here and take a look if I can get the focus. Hopefully the focus is good on the video. But in essence, what you're seeing there is today, solar panel has produced 270 watt hours, and the fridge and everything has consumed 160 watt hours. So we've produced almost twice the fridge consumption today. Yesterday, solar panel generated 210 watt hours, fridge consumed 240 watt hours. Day before, 320 watt hours produced. Consumption on the fridge and anything else that was running in the truck was 270 watt hours, and so on. And so you can see, just with this simple setup here, I'm producing a lot more power than the fridge and all the accessories are drawing. In addition to that, the way this is set up is when you start the truck and drive the truck, the alternator from the truck charges the battery. And so you've got multiple ways to generate power. But if you're just sitting around camp, you know, and you're stationary for 2 or 3 days, your power is going to come from the solar panel, and the solar panel is outpacing the consumption. So that's the solar setup. Pretty straightforward and pretty simple.